unlocking your world of creativity with best-selling author and brand innovator, Mark Stinson. This episode is brought to you by White Cloud Coffee Roasters, nestled in the heart of Idaho's mountain wilderness, where every bean tells a story of adventure. Discover the difference in their premium beans, meticulously roasted to capture the essence of the mountains. Now, listeners of our podcast can get an exclusive 10% discount. Just use the promo code CREATIVITY at checkout. Visit whitecloudcoffee.com and use the code CREATIVITY.
Welcome back, friends, to our podcast, Your World of Creativity. I'm Mark Stinson, and we've traveled around the world talking to creative practitioners of all kinds, from authors to singer-songwriters and architects and restaurateurs, about how they get inspired and how they organize ideas and even how they gain the confidence and connections to launch their work out into the world. And I'm so happy today to be talking to John Klemmer, an innovative and groundbreaking artist in his own right in the jazz fusion and smooth jazz genre. And John's career is just filled with groundbreaking moments. And John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for the nice introduction, and it's so nice to meet you.
It's great to talk to you. And listeners who know the name, but those who don't, John really was groundbreaking in his creation of this jazz fusion, what we now know as smooth jazz format. And John, I was in Chicago, as I mentioned to you in our pre-discussion here, when WNUA was creating this format, and your peers and colleagues and Ramsey Lewis and Larry Carlton and Dave Koz and Richard Elliott. I could go on with these names that you've been working together with. We're creating this entirely new format. I'd love to hear your side of how this ground was broken and what you were thinking when you were pushing for this innovative new sound.
It's interesting that I originally started in straight-ahead jazz, more straight-ahead jazz. And then I started very young. I signed a record contract right out of high school. So I was really blessed. And I learned a lot right away about not only music and its production, of course, but also how the music is related to the public. And to be quite frank, the first couple of albums, it was very exciting for me to play. And then the practical side came into play, like how many records am I selling? How much airplay am I getting? I want to reach as many people as possible. So I started to learn about editing, if you will. Sometimes I'm not great with words, but that's why I'm not a great lyricist. But I learned about taking the concept of the straight ahead jazz and narrowing it down to being more melodically and rhythmically, etc., accessible to more people. And I did that along with a lot of other artists, my peers, at the same time. We all had the same consciousness. And I think that's what created what the media started calling smooth jazz, because the smoothness of it, the accessibility of it, appealed to more people, and we all benefited from it.
Yeah. It's interesting you're talking about this approachability, accessibility, that it became something that people could access. Because jazz being, more esoteric, more free flow, some people couldn't relate to that, certainly as a radio format.
It's very true. And as all the times, eras, and technology evolved, radio became an essential part of being an artist if you wanted to survive and be recognized. We all like that. We all want to be loved. And it's a great thing to hear it's a great thing the first time you hear your own music on radio. That's a thrill. The first time I was in my car on the outer drive of Chicago, coming back from a club gig on the south side of Chicago. It was about 3:00 in the morning. And on the radio, I think it was a station that was from somewhere in Ohio or something. And I heard myself on the radio and trying to hang on to the steering wheel. What a thrill. And it's not only a thrill, but it gave me an instant awareness of a sense of responsibility to the music, to the media, and of course, the bottom line, to the listener. So it was not only fun and nice ego thing, but it gave me a real sense of, hey, this is a big deal. This is an important thing that you're doing.
So interesting. And it sounds more strategic than I expected. We were getting together to make this music more accessible rather than, oh, look, fans found us and came to us.
Sometimes that happens, though. Sometimes. And that's the thing about depending on the awareness of the artist. It's funny, jazz has been essentially looked at as an elitist art form, right? A lot of times I've seen it and I learned from it, a jazz artist, because of the image of it, if he found something that people grabbed onto and liked, he didn't necessarily want to lead into it. It was like the big fear back then was to be commercial, and artists actually avoided it. But this is the evolution of the smooth jazz and all that, is that artists became more pragmatic and more understanding of the medium and the listener, and started to give into. So that happened with me. With my earlier records, I kept on finding that the most popular things that people liked and on radio were the more melodic things. So I went, hey, if you like it, I'll give you more.
There you go. Give the audience what they want. Now, at the same time, there might have been, I'm curious to hear, blowback or resistance. I think about every musical genre has its true aficionados, where the straight ahead jazz people, like when you say commercial, some people would say sold out. What was the feedback from, I'll say, the traditional fans?
I don't know about the fans so much. I started recording in 1967. I'm dating myself here. 1967, and I did about 5 albums for Chess and Cadet Records, which was the main record label in Chicago. And then I moved over to a very lovely record label called Impulse Records. And I did 4 or 5 records there, all straight ahead jazz and stuff like that, some experimental stuff. And then I decided, basically more from an emotional and psychological musical need, to develop a whole new concept. So I came out in 1970 with an album called Touch. And my only interest was making the most melodic and beautiful album that I could. And it went through the roof. It sold like crazy. But the more it sold, the more the critics said I couldn't play. All of a sudden, I can't play. And it was bothersome. And what I did was I had a meeting with Clive Davis. I'm sure you heard his name.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And I met Clive in New York when I was interviewing for new labels. And Clive said, hey, go make me a record for my new jazz label. What was it? Ariston, I think. So he gave me a nice pad of money and said, go do what you want. So I went in the studio, and instead of doing what I did on the Touch album, which was saying that I couldn't play and all that stuff, the critics wise, and I went in and I just went crazy. The album was called Nexus, and it was a double album, and I just played everything I wanted to ever play that I never recorded before. And that's been received very well. But from the fans' point of view, the support from the Touch album and the albums after that, which were, some called me the father of smooth jazz, I've been called. And then my response to that is, don't blame me. Don't blame me. All those elements for me, and as well as a lot of other artists simultaneously, all mushroomed into the smooth jazz genre.
Yeah, and you mentioned the other artists, because you're right. Once there is this movement, there is a metaphysical kind of universal atmosphere. These particles are in the air, that we all had the same idea, or we all had the same movement, that you can say you were the father and that was the genesis of it. One person doesn't drive the whole category, does it?
No. The other element of that particular time where smooth jazz was blossoming is that was at a time when the record companies had an enormous amount of money. When the Beatles came out with their albums, and started to show Beatles were doing concept albums, not just 3-minute tracks, but they were doing artistic, and they sold through the roof. And a lot of other rock and pop artists started doing that. So the labels had an enormous amount of money to spend and get rid of. So that blossomed over to the jazz artists that they had signed on labels like me, that gave us a bigger budget. And of course, with a bigger budget, we were available to have higher string orchestras and do longer tracks and experiment more. So there was that financial era in that same time that helped the smooth jazz mushroom out.
Yes. We're talking about other artists. People certainly associate you with your solo sax work, but the collaborations, the sampling, they featured on other art. I see Steely Dan, certainly a jazz rock kind of fusion band, but it doesn't just happen as a solo artist, does it?
No.
Think about the people that you've worked with. What is your view on the creative process with collabs?
Well, it was always a dream of mine to write pop songs. And like I said earlier, when we started the interview, I'm not such a great lyricist. So I looked around for lyricists to work with as a collaboration. And I learned right away, at least with pop songwriting, that I designated my role as being a supporter. What can I do in the sessions that we're writing together? What can I do to bring the best out of my partner?
Mm.
And as well as I could contribute a line here and write the music. And that's for the songwriting. As far as instrumental music, the first thing that comes into my mind is it's mind reading. It's two guys who know their stuff, they have their musical backgrounds, but each guy and woman have their own approach, how they hear, what notes they hear. Do they play hard? Do they play soft? And the beauty of collaborating is how fast can you tune into your partner, whether it be a keyboard player, guitar player, or the whole band. And the best of the best always have what you call great ears. If I was looking for a new keyboard player and I was asking for recommendations, the guy would say, Dave Grusin, you should work with Dave Grusin. He's got great ears.
So not just the great fingers.
Exactly.
Yes, very nice. I also think about the time that you spend in reflection and reinvention. I read you've taken several sabbaticals through your career to pause and compose and reimagine, reinvent. But today we've got this fast paced, it's digital, it's high turnover. The artists feel a pressure to constantly release new content. Yeah, we've been at the content age now, not just music. Yeah, what advice do you have when younger up and coming musicians ask you, when do I pause? When do I back away? How do I reflect and reinvent? What have you learned?
What I learned with me is that I just followed my intuition of my best advice to myself. Many years ago, what I did when I first started playing and recording, I created an observer, a John Klemmer observer, right? That I would look up and say, what do you want me to do? What do I do now? What do I do now? And I learned to trust my instincts. And sometimes I think I've taken too many sabbaticals and too long. But my advice would be is to follow your heart, follow your good instincts, make sure that you have done your homework. You've studied yourself and your music, but you've also studied and become aware of what's going on out in the world and in your particular genre of work about when it's time to take a pause. Because sometimes it's not only a pause for you, it's a pause for your audience too.
Yes. And you're thinking about the innovations in this rise of digital streaming and independence and labels and technology. It's changed a lot. That's almost a cliche to say that. But you've been somebody who's always been ahead of that curve. How do you see the future, especially of jazz and experimental music and other offshoots of what we now know as smooth jazz? What excites you about where music is heading?
I must say that lately I just got into Facebook and some social media stuff. And I've been listening to a lot of saxophone players who post a lot of stuff. And the only thing that bothers me is they seem to be more interested in how fast they can play, right? So I'm hoping that they will mature and into the nuances of the music, their tone and their musical expression emotionally and psychologically, as well as technically. But what excites me about the future is, oh boy, I don't know. I guess what excites me about the future is that I don't know what it is.
Yes, I love that. And I wanted to, first, I'm going to put all your links and where to find you and your social, like Facebook and Instagram and so forth, your YouTube channel and your website. I'll put all that in the show notes so listeners can find you at
Thank you.
specifically johnklemmer.com. But I wanted to circle and make sure we end on something that you mentioned on your Touch album. It was a worldwide sensation, of course. It deeply connected with people on an emotional level. And you were talking about this kind of artistic expression and really trying to make touch something that people could feel, not just listen to. Isn't that what I think when we think about creativity in the big picture? Are we trying to touch emotion more than we are just the technical presentation of an idea?
I think that ultimately we are. I think some artists naturally have a different passion for other kinds of things, maybe that they don't focus enough. They don't focus for what they're interested in emotionally. But generally, I think that we're human beings, we're emotional beings. There's no way that we can get around that ever. And so the emotional aspect, even if it's like a Picasso or an architect, uh, it's amazing that sometimes somebody will say, "Oh, this architect, look at that building," and you look at the building and you say, "Holy cow, I feel something. How come I feel something? I'm looking at it, but I don't know. I don't understand how or why, but I'm feeling something." And the same thing with a beautiful sculpture, a photograph, and even a scene from a play that moves you, and you go, "Holy cow, I didn't expect that." So I think that will always live, and always be, because it's the essence of we're talking right now, and I can see you on the screen, and vice versa. And this is my first time using Zoom in a podcast. But as I look at you, and as I hear you talk, I can feel you.
Mhm.
And I only hope that you can feel me too.
Absolutely. And listeners, I hope you feel John's creativity and his emotional connection. That's obviously what's driving things. So we do feel it, John. We appreciate it.
Oh, beautiful.
And as you think about your own creativity, what does inspire you these days?
Let's see. What inspires me? It's hard to answer because I don't think about that stuff a lot, only when I'm asked it. And but the world around me, and I'm older now, and I have different appreciations for things maybe that I didn't have as enough before, with people, watching the evolution of humanity, evolution of people, getting older like myself and other people. And interestingly enough, you mentioned that, and something came to my mind. Bear with me with my little pause here. And I said to myself, how can I make some new records, new videos, and how can I add more feeling to it? How can I add more expression to it, especially with having to deal with the digital world and trying to connect through. So I started to think that's a real challenge. How do I incorporate more feeling and concept when I'm playing the music and digitally? I think that's going to be quite a big challenge for me coming up.
Thanks for sharing that.
My pleasure.
John, it's just been a privilege and it's been terrific talking with you. Thanks for coming on the podcast and sharing your journey.
My pleasure. Really an honor. And thank you. I can tell that you've done your homework on me. Thank you for that.
It makes
And
a richer conversation, I hope, anyway.
You bet.
Because
And of course,
it's good to look back and look ahead.
You betcha. And thank you to your listeners and your viewers. Hello.
Yes. We can't wait to keep following your work and see what else is coming. And
Okay.
listeners, if you did enjoy the conversation, I hope you'll follow John and his work, but also subscribe and rate and review the podcast on your favorite platform. It helps us continue to grow our reach, but also attract great guests like John that we've talked to today. Also, would be remiss if I didn't thank our sponsor, White Cloud Coffee Roasters. And listeners, you can enjoy a 10% discount off your next order of coffee when you use creativity as a discount code at checkout at whitecloudcoffee.com. So, John Klemmer, thanks again. I can't wait to go back and listen to some of my favorite smooth jazz sounds.
Okay. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it tremendously. You're very good at what you do.
I appreciate that. And listeners, come back again next time. We're going to continue our around the world journeys talking to creative practitioners about inspiration, about innovation, but also collaboration and connections to get our work out into the world. That's what's important. We've got ideas, but let's don't just keep them inside. Let's get our songs out there. Until next time, I'm Mark Stinson, and we'll keep unlocking your world of creativity.